Hi everyone, you're here sewing with Cody, and we are now working on block 3 of our quilt along. So here is block 3. This is definitely the easiest block we'll come across in our entire quilt along with the 11 blocks that we're working with. And so this one's very straightforward. So let's just jump right in and get started. So I still have some 5.5-inch strips left over from the previous blocks. So we're just going to go and use these. So if you have any questions about how these were cut, you can go and check the other block videos and you can see. And also remember, for every block I do have all the written instructions. They're not quite as detailed as the videos, but I do have the written instructions with plenty of pictures on files that are on my blog. So check those out if you haven't already. So let's get started. So with these, we are going to cut our main large trapezoids from our colors instead of our white pieces, our background pieces. So what we're going to do, we'll just start with the bluish green. And one thing you can also do is you can also cut multiple layers, but you can also cut, and we can do this, you can also cut fabric A and fabric B at the same time. Just one thing you need to make sure of is that you line your fabrics up nice and even so you get this same exact cut. If you're a beginner at cutting, you're new to cutting or quilting in general, I wouldn't recommend cutting multiple layers at a time. But if you are more confident in your cutting, then absolutely cut 2. Max, I would say, is 3, because any more than that, those layers start to shift when you're running that rotary cutter through, and those bottom layers, those middle layers can shift, and you'll end up with a piece that's slightly bigger or smaller or a different angle, and it can mess up your piecing when you actually start piecing. But we can definitely cut 2 layers at the same time. So what we'll do is we'll line up our ruler here. And remember, all of these blocks so far we're working with 5.5-inch strips, so we're going to be working with the 5.5-inch marking on the ruler. So we're going to line up our 5.5-inch marking here and at the bottom. And then we're going to slice. We are going to slice along this angled side. So there we are. We've got 2 so far. And for this block, we need 2 of the pink fabric and 2 of the green teal fabric. So 2 of fabric A and 2 of fabric B. So now we can rotate our ruler. So we just took it from here to here, and then we have that 5.5-inch marking again, except we're going to line up the angled side, our cut side, and our bottom piece, and then we're going to cut along this flat side here, and that's it. So now we've got our 2 large trapezoids, well, 4 large trapezoids, 2 green and 2 pink, so 2 of fabric A and 2 of fabric B. So now we're going to work on our background piece. So our background piece is going to be made up of smaller trapezoids. So we're going to be using this part of the ruler. So we come down, we can see the 5.5-inch marking here. So we're going to line up our left side and our bottom side, and we'll cut. So we've got 1, and we need 3 more. So one thing we can do, so this is how we cut the first one, so now I've got an angle. What we can do is we can rotate the ruler and then flip it. And what's so neat about this Creative Grid ruler is we've got markings labeled and everything on the back side as well. So it's a double-sided ruler, super cool. But one thing to remember is only one side has that unique patented Creative Grid gripping, or the gripper on the back of the ruler. So this side of the ruler is going to slide a little bit. Something you can definitely do is get some of Handy Grip has excellent ruler grip, or there's clear circles. They're kind of rubbery that you can add to the back as well, or the front, and it'll keep it from sliding. We use a lot of those types of grips when we're using rulers for ruler work quilting. So we flipped the ruler, so we started from here, and we just rotated it and then flipped it. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up the cut side with this angle here, and then the bottom, and that should line up nicely with the 5.5, and we're still going to cut along this. And this is where we were, so we can just flip the ruler this way really, and then we've got our same side that we cut the first one with. So let's cut that 5.5 inch marking. So we're lining up here and here, and we're going to cut. And then we really could just flip it this way. And we're going to do the same thing as we did for the second step. Line it up with here and the bottom. It's naturally going to line up with the 5.5 marking here. Cut up the side, and now we have all of our pieces. So it's seeing 4 background small trapezoids and then 4 larger trapezoids from each color. So now, like I said, this block is super easy. So we'll start with this block here. So we're basically going to sew so you create that shape. So we're going to lay them down here. And remember, I always like a little hangover. Well, we need a little bit of a hangover on each side to create like a little diamond. And remember, I like to pin, especially when you work with multiple pieces. So like again, if we're going to make a quilt out of this entire block, it's nice because you can do all this cutting ahead of time, and then you can pin them in place and then take the entire stack to your sewing machine. Everything stays together and everything's pretty much lined up where it needs to be. And then you can just chain piece them and sew them all together. So lay this one here. I'm going to lay this one here as well. Pin them, and then we'll go over to our sewing machine. All right, let's go to the sewing machine, sew these up, and then we'll go to the iron and press them. So here we are at the sewing machine, and just like with every other piece that we've sewn, these are done just the same. So we make sure we have our little hangover here, and the same thing down here. So when we start sewing, we want to make sure that, of course, we're using our 1/4 inch foot with our straight stitch plate. Makes all the difference in the world. And of course, make sure that you've told the machine that you are working with that straight stitch plate. Just makes life easier if your machine's capable of doing so, of course. And I've got my Aurifil 50 weight thread in the top and my Deco Bob in the bobbin. That's just my preference. You can do whatever you want. But as I've mentioned before, I like to use thinner threads when I'm piecing because it allows those seams to lay much flatter. Aurifil 50 weight is a very, very common weight and thread in general for piecing. But I like to switch it up a little bit, and I like to use Deco Bob in the bobbin instead of the Aurifil in the top. So let's take our first stitch. So here we've got all our pieces stitched, and I chain piece them together. So now I can go and separate all of those pieces, take out my pins, put them on my magnetic pin cushion, and then we'll just move over to the iron and press these down. And that would be it for each individual block, and then we'll just construct the entire block together. So here we are at the iron. We've got our pieces, and remember, you want to press them to the dark side. So what that's going to entail is you're going to want to make sure that you're pressing these seams towards that way. So we're looking at them, you don't see it underneath the white fabric. So I like to press them back. And of course, as I mentioned in every video, it's very important that you push these seams all the way back so you don't have any fold of your fabric down, because that will make a huge difference in your pieces, because they'll be a different size and it just can really start to distort your fabric or your piece. So we'll press this down and we'll go and do this for all 4 squares. So now that we've got all of our squares pressed, we're going to go back to the cutting table and trim them up, or make sure that they're the correct size at the 5.5 inches, and we'll cut off these little ears, these little doggy ears that are left. So here we are, we're back at the cutting table. So we're going to check the size of our square, and of course we're going to use our handy dandy 6.5 inch ruler, and so we can just line it up with the 5.5 and the 5.5 inch here. So it looks good enough to me. So we'll trim off those little doggy ears there. And you can go and check each one, but we're just gonna keep on rolling. So I like to trim off these little ears because they can get in the way when you're trying to put the whole block together, and it looks nice and cleaner if they're gone, and it just makes it easier to work with. So now we're almost done. So what we're going to do is we're going to construct our main block. And it's all about how you lay the pieces out. It's depending on how the block forms. But there we are. So that's our block. So what we're going to do, just like we used to do in the other blocks, we're going to lay this one over this one, and we'll use our little pins. And then we'll come to this one and lay that one over there. And I like to pin. And what's also nice about the pin is that when I take it over to the machine, if I drop them or move them around, I never have to second guess which side I need to sew them down on. And of course, when you pin, I like to pin far enough away from the edge that I don't have to move the pin when I'm sewing. All right, let's go to the machine. So here we are back at the machine. So we're just going to make sure that all of our ends line up nicely, our little corners. And sew them together. So I can take out my pins, cut that. So now we're going to go over to the ironing board real quick, and I'm going to press these. But I'll show you the direction which I'm going to press them here. So here's the top, and then here's the bottom. So what we're going to do, we're going to press the bottom one so the seam is going to the right, because we want it underneath the dark fabric, and the top one, we're going to press it in the opposite direction, just like we do with all of our blocks. And so what that does, since we have a seam going this way and a seam going the opposite direction, they'll interlock when we go and press, or when we go and sew the top and the bottom together. So let me go and press these, and we'll come back and sew these together. So here we are back. So we've got a top and our bottom piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay this on top. And you can see how the direction of those seams are going in opposite directions. So the main thing we want to pay attention to is that we can easily interlock those pieces. Just like that. So it should pinch and lay nice and flat. Just like that. Perfect. So we can even take one of our little pins and pin it in place to keep it from moving on us. And so now we can go and line up our top. We can stitch that down, and then we can stitch this down, and then once we get to about to the our seam here, we can then focus on the last half. And the entire time as we're sewing, we want to make sure that our top and bottom layer are staying nice and lined up with the edge. All right, so all we have to do now is press this. And like I mentioned in the previous videos, I like to press this seam open. So I'll bring it to the iron and I'll press this seam nice and open. And this will allow these seams to lay nice and flat. And there's our quilt. Well, our quilt block anyway. Nice and easy. So that is it for the third block in our Quilt Along series. So stay tuned for next week for block 4. And remember, if you have any questions, any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get an answer to you in a timely fashion. But what's so great is hopefully there'll be a number of people following along and creating these blocks. So if anybody has a question, leave it there, and when I answer, or someone else may be able to answer it for you before I get to it. But everybody who may also have that same question will be able to see the answers from me or from our fellow sewers out there. So leave questions and comments in the comment section below, and remember to always like the videos, and of course if you're not subscribed, you should be subscribed by now. So just hit that subscribe button, and as always, happy sewing.